almost never is not always. And it sounds like the word of a rebellious eyewitness. Let's call this chapter CSI Rotterdam. I stand here at the epic center of Western civilization and look back on the past 2,500 years of global history. This should be my time. But I enter the world and see to my utter consternation the burden that these people have to bear under the terror of ethnic conflicts, economic inequality, greed, and his brother corruption. And I understood the pain in my chest, which will not be named. And I understood how darkness had tightened its grip on humanity. And it all happened in the name of freedom. In this pursuit of unity, they have afforded more than can be justified, because greed, hate, and malice have eroded and crushed the dream of unity. The burning pain in my chest whispers to me and tells me to rip out my heart, not to feel anything. But how can I be without a heart? The ability to feel. I cannot be without a heart. And slowly the entanglement makes its entrance and starts, according to an unparalleled pattern, to enwrap me. What can and what can't. What to say and what not. How to behave and how not to. In the meanwhile, I hear people around me say and do things which they said not to. And the confusion increases. My head conflicts with my heart. It feels like war in heaven. My head tells me feelings hurt. I can hear what it says, but it doesn't resemble how these words make me feel. It hasn't always been like that. The confusion. As a child, I could sense people spot on. I could tell a lie, blindfolded, hands on my back and under pressure. I could smell it. I sometimes clearly saw how a lie came into the world, cloaked as in a cape of truth. In the past, that caused a lot of problems. There were teachers who were willing to accept the lies they'd made up of me. They had opinions already to classify me without ever having looked at me. By the time I finished primary school, there were many volunteers prepared to replace my teachers by asserting things about me which were pretty fucking far from the shadow of anything that came close to the truth. I'm not saying that I was a Boy Scout, but I refused to live up to the bullshit they wanted me to believe. My parents, I always guessed my mother looked at me as a burden. Partly due to a recurring dream I had until my 13th year. A dream in which I was laying on my belly and my mother sat on my back, tying my hands and blindfolding me. Then my brother came and sat beside her while she emptied my pockets, which were filled with seeds and keys, which she passed on to my brother. I hardly spoke about it because my grandmother came to me and told me never to talk about my dreams. And if I tried, I couldn't find the right words, or I started to stutter because of an inexplicable itch in my throat. It was actually a pretty bad dream. Later, I have had that dreams a couple of times without my mother, but with the woman I lived with at that time. You see, when she spoke, little crocodiles came out of her mouth, and I had to spray liquid gold around so the situation wouldn't escalate. Damned dream. Trying to shove me a nightmare of my happiness. Hell no, not today. Oh, now that I've mentioned it, if I die, make a departure under suspicious circumstances, have a chat with my mother. And if she's unavailable, try my brother. But that aside, apart from that, my mother had been divorced twice and married 3 times, of which 2 times with the same man. She had 3 sons from her first marriage and a daughter from her marriage with my father. Well, to me it was obvious that I wasn't planned. But hey, we all do things of which afterward we come to the conclusion that we should have handled it differently. Like my parents. You see, they had the opportunity to move from Suriname to the Netherlands. So, when they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, there was only one thing I could do. I bowed my head and did what I was told. But once we arrived in Holland, everything changed. Because when I was 5 years old, I got a friend, Ernest. He lived across kindergarten, a real friend. One who didn't steal your toys or broke them because he was jealous, but invited me over to his parents' house to have a sandwich with cheese and syrup. Oh yeah. That was my chance to show my parents I wasn't going to obey their prohibitions and made-up laws. Apparently, I wasn't allowed to talk to strange people, white people to be exact, and definitely not take any fruit from them. That was a ban. Because it was one of the bans, it was obvious it would be violated. The first thing I had to accomplish was reverse the ban. So after long and continuously repeating the question, at least 40 times a day, I convinced myself I just had to do it. The first time I stayed over at Ernst, his father was also present. The four of us were sitting at the dining table. Ernst opposite of me, on my left side his mother, and his father on my right. Without any reason, his father grabbed my right and his mother my left hand. They closed their eyes and started to murmur. I looked at Ernst, who stared at me with the one eye he had open and then closed that eye too. That's where I got scared. I sat there, sandwiched between these white people and afraid to breathe. I thought of all the warnings my mother had given me. I thought of the demonic forces they invoked to pull out my soul of my body while murmuring incomprehensible incantations. My eyes wide open, I sat there listening to the pounding of my heart and preparing myself for the end of my short-lived life. All of a sudden, they all stopped and said, Amen. His father opened his eyes, smiled at me and said, Bon appetit. Released my hand, and with the pointing finger and thumb of his left hand, he picked up a slice of white bread, dropped it on his plate, made the sound of a hiccup or burp, and fell with his face in a basket with freshly baked bread, which at that time was very funny because he fell in slow motion. The odd thing was that he didn't move, and Mrs. Vreugdenhil started to scream. That was the first time I saw panic and knew what it was. I thought something went wrong during the ritual with the closed eyes. But there was no time for questions like that because Mrs. Vreugdenhil was running up and down the room screaming and shit. And this all happened in Rotterdam. Eh? I was 5 years old. And it didn't look good. Now I knew when someone would die. I started to understand why my parents didn't want me to hang out with these strange white people. They knew I might discover how to recognize death and outwit the sneaky bastard. Mrs. Vreugdenhil stopped screaming and started to call for God. Oh God, Ewout, oh God, Ewout, oh God. And that was so freaky because I realized these people know God by her first name. And because this was so disturbing, I lost control of my bladder. And in order to restore that, I imagined how God would appear in the skin of a fish and whisper in my head, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tsebayot. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tsebayot. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tsebayot. But it didn't work. While Mrs. Vreugdenhil was shouting for help, Ernst and I looked at each other in silence. We hadn't had a single bite of food, but this lunch was already legendary. That afternoon, Ernst didn't come to school. And for the rest of the day, I thought of him, how he and his mother were trying to get Mr. Vreugdenhil straight up in his chair again. After that lunch, I never got the chance to stay over at Ernest's place. My mother had taken really good care of that. My parents never intended to settle in Holland. My oldest brother definitely would. He did things I also wanted to do. My parents always had this thing about returning to the mothership. So when Suriname got its independence, they went back to rebuild the country. But that's a story for another time.
Die heeft hij ook gemaakt, die heet de Hommage aan New York. En die machine zou zichzelf moeten ontmantelen. Ten slotte zou er van die machine niks moeten overblijven. En Tangley maakte van die machines allemaal werktekeningen en grote schetsboeken. Maar voor deze machine, die zichzelf dus uit elkaar kon halen, heeft hij wel zo'n dik boek van tekeningen moeten maken. Daar heeft hij het hardste over moeten nadenken. Hoe je iets uit elkaar haalt in plaats van in elkaar zet. Deconstructions van de groep LOOS.
Folks, come gathered around my stand. This is Chuck Moe's Happy Dixie Band. The boys and I are glad to... Well, hello, Jack. Jack, when did you get back? Man, I thought that... There's old Aunt Kate. She's a solid case. She's a solid case. She's a solid case. Well, I never thought you would be out that late. Well, how you doing, Jack? Man, I thought that bird you out... Well, how you doing, Jack? Well, how you doing, Jack? I thought that bird... Well, how you doing, Jack? I thought that bird you out there. Now, look here, man. Let me tell you something. What is it that you got that my wife think you so hot? Huh? Come on, tell me that. Come on, tell me that. Come on, tell me that. Now, look here, boy. Let me tell you something. You're the most no-goodest cat I ever met. Huh. Now, tell me that. Now, tell me that. Water, you no ain't no water. No ain't no what. What are you? No ain't no water. You. When the sun turns blue, that was gladiator legend. Now I know something. Just say something like that.
Because I don't do any wrong things. Because I'm telling my musician, listen to me. No, listen to me.
When did you get back? Get down and join the band. Get down and join the band. All right, get down and join the band. Get down and join the band. Come on, get down and join the band. Get down and join the band. Come on, join the band. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. Now give me 5. Give me 5 more. Give me 1 more, 5 more. 7, yeah. Right. Cool. Get down. Relax. Relax. Deconstruct it all. Deconstruct it all. And I said, don't be blessed, y'all. I said, don't be blessed, y'all. What now? Make a word. Make a word. Make a word. Well, you can shape on my hair and call me Bolden. You're good. You can shape on my hair and call me Bolden. yeah.
Yeah, I'm tired of jazz.
Good evening. We're sitting here at LOOS with Dennis Rudge and Peter van Bergen. Dennis, we have seen videos and we've heard you speak a wonderful text. Will you introduce yourself to us further?
Well, I'm Dennis Rudge. I'm an actor, performer. I worked with Peter since 1993, long ago.
Yeah.
And he asked me for this special night, evening at LOOS, and I said yes, because it's a celebration for the time we work together.
It's really, really great having you here, and I was invited last minute to join, and I'm excited to meet you, to see some of your work. The text that you read earlier was touching and funny and sad and all of that combined, and I have way too many questions already for you. We could probably sit here all evening, so I'll have to be a little bit picky on thinking about what I would like to know about you. One thing that came to mind just watching the work that you did is that I thought, okay, when I think traditionally of actors, because you've done traditional stage acting,
Yeah.
and you have been featured in TV series and
Yeah.
films. So having had that knowledge before coming here tonight, I have a certain picture of an actor focusing on text and body language and certain skills that you acquire camera work. But of course, seeing you work with something like the LOOS ensemble, or the first piece that we saw tonight, the Rijmakers piece, that requires an entirely different skill set. That's work that is heavily sound-based.
Yeah.
And how did you get into that from, probably that's not how you started out. I'm assuming you did some more traditional training and things before you went off into that area. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Exactly like that, because I started at this particular play we opened with was a Hollandia play. And at that time, at that period of time in my life as an actor, I was in a very experimental part of finding things out, trying things out. And Hollandia was like the best school, the best place to be, because you had Johan Simons and Paul Cook and Dick Rijmakers together, and they made up unusual stuff, and they had they made experimental theater, and we had to learn how to relate to that, because as when you look at the first part, that was a copy of a bunraku singer, a Japanese bunraku singer, copied by Dick Rijmakers, who sampled my voice and lowered it, so it matched the voice from the Japanese actor, and we played with that, and that is a completely different way of approaching a play, because normally you get your lines and you play it, and you learn your lines the best way you can, with interpretation and everything, and then you rehearse it. Now they had this idea to write they had a Japanese, 18th century Japanese play, Kayinho, and they wanted to translate that, but there was nobody really willing to do that, because we asked the Japanese Institute, and they said, well, we're working on that, we're working on that, we're working on that. And in the meantime, we were rehearsing the play. And then we heard someone said, they're not going to do that, because the Kayinho is a traditional Japanese play, and it's kind of sacred. Mm-hmm. So what they came up with was brilliant. They asked Lodewijk de Boer, a Dutch writer, to write a Dutch Kayinho, And they translated that into 18th century Japanese.
Wow.
And we learned that. So these lines you heard are translated out of Dutch into 18th century Japanese. It's amazing. And that approach opened up my head, because I thought you could turn things around. You could start somewhere and not knowing where you're going to come out.
Apart from obviously crazy concepts, big ideas, experimental sort of pieces that were being created, I'm interested to hear about how that was for you physically to get into that, because it looks like you really went to extremes with your voice.
Yep.
And sort of your face, your whole expression, but without moving other than that a whole lot, which maybe has a Japanese element also in that you were fairly stoic physically in that.
You were trained.
But really, really going out vocally. How did you prepare, or how did that feel? Was it difficult to get into that?
Yes, it was tough. We had we rehearsed for 3 months. And every day we did a warming up, a 2-hour warming up with Cunningham training, ballet training, and yoga
fantastic.
training. And we were strong. We were strong physically and mentally. We did meditations, because it was a really tough play to do. And because of that training, we could lift the world. Because of Anna Wasserman, it's Anna. Can't get the name. Anna. Thank you, Anna. She was the best. She did the training, and she was tough. No jokes.
So that sounds like a good, in fact, very wholesome all-around approach with going into the voice, the body, the mind, meditation.
Yeah.
And was that before you met Peter?
After that, we did the show, and Peter came to the show, and because Paul Cook was also in
Is
the
that the
ensemble.
link, in fact, that brought
Yeah.
all of the... Okay, the Paul Cook
And
link.
Peter saw the show and asked me to do something with LOOS, because we talked, and we got off very easily, and it was okay. And I thought, it's okay, it's nice, let's do this. And then we started, and we still do things together now.
So Peter, when you first saw Dennis perform, did you think like, oh, I have to get this guy on board with something? What was your first impression? I mean, a very strong one, obviously.
Yeah, well, when you put it like this, I would like to say the opposite, of course, but no, of course. Dennis was very impressive. You could see that in this piece from De Graaimakers with Paul Cook. And before that, I played a lot already with quite a range of great jazz musicians. And I felt the same kind of energy and expression with Dennis, but then in a different discipline. So he had the power, he had the skills, and he had the expression possibilities. So then I thought, okay, the music of LOOS wouldn't have been possible without the music of Sun Ra, Cecil Taylor, Anthony Braxton, George Lewis, all these people, and these great Afro-American musicians. So I would not have been a musician without them, I have to say. And so Dennis was somebody who was close to LOOS because of Paul Cook. And so I felt I had the courage to ask him. And then we started doing improvisation games. So I think improvisation is the real business of LOOS. So we ask you in a very late moment.
Yes,
And
I'm improvising heavily right now.
yeah, I think that's very good, because when you are not prepared to a situation, well, some people, of course, there are also people who cannot do that, but some people get the best out of themselves. Suddenly you see unexpected possibilities, unexpected wisdom, freeness, freedom. So yeah, and that worked out extremely well with Dennis. in the pieces we had, which were about stability and instability. So stable stuff and unstable stuff.
And that's still one of your favorite subjects, right?
Yeah.
It's a lifelong exploration.
I think it's also something which I cannot avoid.
Mm-hmm.
It's something which I will always look for in any situation. Stability and instability.
Picking up that keyword, was that something that you had consciously explored before meeting Peter, or this sort of stability, instability, is it something that he really brought to the forefront when you worked with him?
Yes, I got to know it through Peter, because in the theater, you get your lines, you get the play, you get the director, you get stage directing.
And it shouldn't go wrong.
And it shouldn't
Whereas
go
with
wrong
Peter,
because
anything can happen, right?
No, with Peter it's the opposite. Peter says, okay, you have some ingredients, and we have a certain amount of time, and so let's work. And we have for a play we rehearsed 3 times, maximum. So we know like a route, so how to get from A to B. But in between, we don't know, and that was new to me, because normally you know where you're going to go, because you start a scene, you know where you're going to go. But with this LOOS ensemble, you start a play, and if someone does something unexpectedly, you have to react, and then it could go 10 minutes out of course, and then you have to come back, or not. But it doesn't matter, because that's the play, and it's frightening, but it's also it gives you a lot of freedom, because if you embrace that with your courage, with your heart, with everything you got, you can create something so unexpected and so beautiful, and you're amazed afterwards, because we had concerts which were so amazing that we thought, what was that? And we surprised each other. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we did things and we thought we were great, and the audience was silent. and the same play, and it's amazing. It's in the theater, it's the same, but with these plays, Peter, F051, it's like that, because the F051 is one of the compositions.
And when you work with a traditional play, of course, you rehearse, and you're hoping or expecting to have a number of evenings where you are expected to sort of create the same thing again. Yeah. Maybe improve on it a little bit with some notes from the director or whatever. How did you feel about creating something that was amazing, but that you knew would not occur again? Not in that format, with this freedom that you have, but also sort of this maybe almost kind of Zen attitude behind it, or if you have that attitude that you know that moment is past, gone, and it'll never happen like that again.
I know. I've had these moments, and I cherish them because they are sacred, and I can count them on like one hand, because they are special. Now, the one we saw 2 tonight, the BIMhuis and the Burakus, they are special. That cannot be repeated, and because of that, I value them, because they are special. They cannot be recreated, because it was only that night. And if we tried, because we reminded each other, we're not going to try to repeat that, because subconsciously, somewhere in the back of your head, that was good.
You think, that went well, and maybe I can do that again,
and then next time,
should do something else.
Yeah, you cried all night.
Right.
Because you tried, or you didn't try, but maybe in a way you tried to reproduce, and it didn't work. Yeah. And that was your lesson.
Then it's the lesser version of what happened before, and then you shouldn't try to do that again. Absolutely.
So when it happens, when the moment happens, it's gold. I embrace it, and when it's over, it's gone.
Then it's gone.
Yeah.
A question back to you, Peter. Having someone added to your ensemble as a vocalist, as an actor, apart from the general concepts that you were working on and your inspirations that all somehow seem to work with Dennis and match, what did his presence bring to you that you would not have explored or done otherwise?
Of course, the body language, which you have with the other performers also. But with Dennis you also had text, and these texts had a meaning, I have to say. They were taken from Louis Armstrong, they were taken from Sun Ra. They they reflected jazz history for me, jazz is extremely important for me. Mm-hmm. So Dennis brought also a different kind of dynamics into it. He came and he left. The others stayed. So Dennis came onto stage and then he left, went to the back. And I experienced that also. Well, some years ago I was at a conference in Glasgow, and it was about staging jazz. It was in 2010. Well, it's not some years ago, of course. But in 2010, and there it was a nice conference about the importance of staging in jazz and improvised music, I say now. How you stage the music is extremely important for your musical message. And it says something about how you deal with composition and improvisation, how you deal with freedom. And the funny thing about working with LOOS and Dennis was that we had concerts where people were totally confused. For instance, on the West Coast Jazz Festival in Vancouver, they thought everything we did was composed. It was not.
I was wondering, also watching a couple of the things you sent, because I saw, okay, there were some scores maybe visible, but I was wondering what is on there. Does it say at some point scream, or are there notes, or, at what point do you come together? It's just quite mysterious, because it works so well together. There's such a unity, but something so spontaneous about it at the same time that the audience can't help but wonder how much that has been rehearsed or not.
Well, of course we rehearsed, and the LOOS ensemble rehearsed a lot, but I always compare us with, of course not their way up there. They all are now, by the way. The Duke Ellington Orchestra, for instance, they rehearsed all day. They instrumentated themselves during the rehearsal. Mm-hmm. That's what we also did. And then on stage, they looked for freedom, and they looked for possibilities. So, what was the question?
That's a super answer, I think, to whatever my question was, but I like it.
And because you asked, the question was, was it composed? It's not. It's a composition. It's more of a roadmap. Yeah. Because it doesn't. Peter doesn't say, well, you have to do this there, or you have to do this there. It's a roadmap, because you have a chord here and a chord there and a sound there, and in between these sounds and chords, we move. Mm-hmm. And
so you're given elements that you're free to use.
Exactly. Yeah. And the guitar can do something. Peter can come in, but we look at each other all the time, and not with our eyes, but with our ears, our backs, our arms, with everything we got, because we are one on stage, and that's amazing, because that's what you see. Because we are so glued together on an energetic level that we feel, I know something's going to happen because I feel it. And they feel that I'm going to do something, so they leave a hole. I cannot explain it in a different way, because that's...
Yeah, well, I think that also what connected the piece of Dick Rijmakers' Bunraku with LOOS is that I have been interested in No theater from Japan since the 80s. And this piece from Dick Rijmakers and Paul Cook was from 93. So I had a long history myself in incorporating silence and how to deal with silence in music. So we found a way to transform the idea of when do you see improvisers think on stage? So how can you think of a way to make visible for the audience, but also for the players, that improvisers are looking for possibilities, do not always move together, but so suddenly some things stood still, and they could stand still for 30 seconds. And I can recall a very nice discussion between Louis Andriessen and Maarten Altena. Maarten Altena is one of the great Dutch artists, especially in improvised music, as a player, but also as a composer. And we all know, of course, Louis Andriessen. And they had a discussion in the BIMhuis during a LOOS concert that Louis Andriessen said, LOOS is about nee, which is no. And Maarten Altena said, no, LOOS is about yes. And so that's how we played with silences and with yes and no within a score. And about the difficulty of the scores, I have very beautiful situation to remember the great Wolfgang Fuchs, contrabass player, saxophonist from Berlin. He was once with us in Nijmegen. We had enormous scores, and we made all the scores ourselves. We were sitting on the ground with 5 guys, gluing the scores together, and taking a pencil to look where possible combinations were. And then on stage, we had this enormous score, this route. Where should we go? So Wolfgang Fuchs was standing next to me, and it was a traditional score, which means you start left up and you end right under. Okay, so we started, and then during the concert, Fuchs was only late because he didn't know where he was. And the piece was half an hour. And he felt so bad. I was sorry for him. So he, for the whole group, he bought whiskey just to drink it away. This awful experience. So that, I think that's beautiful about it's somebody should not have a bad experience, of course, but it's beautiful about the risk of improvisation.
Yeah, it has beauty.
Yeah, this beauty is beautiful.
Because it's dangerous. Because people pay to come and look at you, and they expect something. So you have to deliver.
You have to give something.
But on the other hand, you tell yourself, relax, everything's going to be okay because you got this. But it's not certain because someone could be left behind. And then what happens? But that's the thing. If you look at it as a roadmap and not a composition, a roadmap means you can start over again at a certain part.
Or hang out at the rest stop.
And wait for it. So, okay, I'm going to wait until the bus comes here, and then I jump on. But that takes an open mind and not closed, because you should be thinking, I have to do this.
No, you have to relax into it, otherwise it won't work. Yeah. Maybe one more question. I don't know how long we're supposed to talk, but I have another question.
Yes, please.
Was there something, because this all sounds so wonderful and cool, but were there moments where you guys were facing each other and either one of you was like, no, not really, like, not that? You know, where something went really against your aesthetics or went too far or didn't feel right, or was it smooth, overall speaking?
Not always. We've definitely have had situations where we looked at each other and we were blank. We didn't have a clue where we were, and you could see in the eyes people standing there, or I don't know which way, left or right, but I'm going to take a look at him, and he doesn't know anything, okay? And you could see but the panic caused tension on stage.
Well, it's the instability and the stability, and that works out. Right.
People think that it's composed because
maybe they especially like that moment in the end, you know, like when this and that happened, you're like, aha. That wasn't meant to happen,
when you're on stage and you're part of that group, and in the wild, not knowing where to go, you sweat. You cannot panic, but you go through the piece in your head like in light speed. Where am I? Okay, where will we? Okay, where do we have to go? And okay, that was the last chord we hit. Okay. I hope he has it too.
Well, I also have to say that these pieces are composed frustrations. And I thought a lot about it, because certain elements were connected to certain personalities. And I had an imagination, because I made these pieces, I composed them, if you can say so, with the personalities in mind. So I thought, okay, when I give this element to Gerard Bouwhuis, for instance, and I give the next element to Huip Emmer, I know, I have a clue what might happen. But then I should include something frustrating for them, so that they will build up their own tension, and they will be totally motivated to put in their own stuff. Because when you are an improviser, you study at home, you have your own imagination, and then you think, okay, tonight I'll do the best improvisation of the world. And then you come on stage and you have to deal with 5 other people. and then you also have to deal with a score, and then you think, okay, how am I going to do that? And then you have this enormous expectation of yourself and of the musical situation, and then you are frustrated. Okay. So how am I going to deal with frustration? So this was built in, I have to be honest. But it worked out well, because these were all, of course, excellent artists, and they were up to the risk game. So let's try to fix something and see how we can deal with unexpected situations, and how we can deal with our own personalities, bring my own ideas further, or step back, just as normal life. How to deal with your own frustrations, how to respect the other, how to keep distance, how to jump in. These are all things which you will see in normal life. So improvisation in normal life was also improvisation in these situations.
Cool.
Can you connect to that, Dennis?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because uncertainty.
Yeah.
That's improvisation. You don't know where you're going to go. And because some parts, some pieces were hard to do, because you have to go deep. Because if you did it without any heart, you would hear that. So when you jumped, you had to go.
But these days, I think, there should always be something nasty in the discussion, I think. So what I really think is not a good situation is that they teach these days improvisation as something in which you cannot make mistakes. And I think that when you see improvisation as taking risk, unpredictability, unexpected situations, then you have to accept the fact that things will happen which you do not expect, and that you say, okay, normal life, I would say this is a so-called mistake, but in improvisation, this is a chance. So you have to have a different point of view or standpoint all the time. So you have to be very flexible. And a mistake is not bad, it's a chance. How to deal with it. And when you teach people about improvisation, it should always connect to the fact that a mistake, everybody makes mistakes, so-called mistakes.
Yeah.
And improvisations, these are possibilities.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally, you should allow that in regular life too, which
Yes.
that would be something good to take from that, which we don't allow ourselves most of the time.
Opportunities. A mistake is an opportunity.
Totally.
Because I agree with Peter, because also in my field of profession in acting, there are a lot of actors afraid to make mistakes, because they're afraid to make mistakes. I'm glad I don't. I'm not. I'm not afraid to make mistakes. I make a lot of mistakes. I know. and I learn from them. But that is maybe something I learned from LOOS, through LOOS, because
I could
being with
imagine
LOOS, and having the opportunity to do something, and not always being top-notch or on my toes or the best I could, but being able to do that and do it, get the opportunity to do it the next time, that's great, because that gave me that opened my mind, and yeah, it formed me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You learned us a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. You learned me too, because what I say, in school, I went to school. I did some also. I did a lot of schools, but I saw what I saw that my fellow students were afraid to make mistakes. Like writing a piece, and they were afraid to make a mistake. And I thought, just write it, and if you don't know it, you just write it down the way you see it at that point, and then you talk about it. And you're not going to be shot because you made a mistake. The teacher's going to tell you what you did wrong or how it should be done, and you go and do it again. A lot of people don't have that attitude because it has to be perfect the first time. Mm-hmm. And I think people think that because of these schools, people think that when you do something, it has to be perfect the first time you do it. And it's not like that, because you learn something. Life is about learning. It's about experiencing things which are new to you. And once you've learned it, it becomes part of your being, your knowledge of the person you are. And then you go on and you run into something new you have to learn. And that's going to do, if it's good. If you're lucky, it goes on till you die. If you're not so lucky, it stops when you're 30, and then you think you know it all. And then you have to do the rest. And then 20 years later, you find out you've been standing still because you thought you knew everything. No, you have to learn. And that's like improvisation.
Yeah, I think, thanks a lot, Dennis.
Those are really fantastic closing words, actually, right?
Yeah, and I just want to say a very short thing about the current situation of LOOS, of course. Please support LOOS. We have a long history in music. We have a long history with great artists. And please sign a petition and make the politicians in The Hague clear how important it is to have a place where you can take risks and where you can develop out of the let's say the academic situation, have the freedom to work further on your own expressions and ideas, and without having the fear to make mistakes.
Great. Thank you.
So it's all death on this planet. Life. Death. It's ridiculous. Life. Forget the word life. be rather than to die. So I saw death on this planet. Well, so I saw death on it. Forget the word life. Death. Death.
Have nothing. Nothing I have. I have the treasure of nothing. How treasured rich I am. This and these are mine. All of it. Vast, endless nothingness. That stretches out.
Thank you very much. The pieces we just played were FA 5.1.